The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Big thanks to our dear friend Will Wilson for covering us yesterday. We had a bit of a getaway day on a bye-weekend Friday. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We were out on the links. We should have stayed in the clubhouse the way we played, but you know what? It was a gorgeous Friday. And we're back at it this morning. Our friend Mark Cranack on assignment this morning, and he'll be back and ready to rock and roll for Illinois next Saturday. Numbers to get in this morning. If you want to participate, if you're up and going this early, making a run to get a cup of coffee or maybe a donut, numbers to dial up at 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Those are the numbers to get in. Can find us on StreamYard. We're streaming ESPN Lincoln, Facebook Live, Twitter on ESPN Lincoln, and the Hail Varsity Twitter page as well at HVarsity Radio. I should just call it the Twitter handle. Forgive me. But Elijah, the most important question for you as you have a day full of college football and Ultimate Fighting tonight. Were you up and alive to get that brisket put on the smoker this morning at 2 a.m.?
It was closer to 3:30 once I finally got out of bed and found the motivation to get the brisket on. But the brisket is on. It's when I left home, it was sitting at about 145 degrees, and I passed off control to one of my roommates and said, "Don't F this up." So we'll see how things go whenever I get back home. It's probably 20-ish degrees or so from being ready to pull off. So hopefully it's wrapped up and lovely by the time I get home from this show, and we'll see. But yes, it's going, and I'm looking forward to that brisket. It's a labor of love, and so far there's been a lot of love on my end for that brisket on a Saturday morning. So
you've done salt, pepper, and any garlic salt. What was the rub? The dry rub for it.
So I had some whole black peppercorns that I ground up in a food processor last night, and then I threw in some salt and some garlic powder in there as well, and that was the rub. So it's about equal parts salt and black pepper, and then just a touch of garlic salt to add a little something. And from trying it last night, the rub was freaking phenomenal. So I hope it translates well to the brisket. I've done a brisket with my dad before. I've never done a brisket solo, though, simply because over the past year or so, brisket prices have been crazy. So came down a little bit in price, and hopefully I don't mess up this $55 piece of meat, because if I do, I'll be very disappointed and my wallet will be hurting.
Listen, I'll say this. It's a brisket Saturday for you. Mm-hmm. It could be better, it could be worse, but the point is you're having brisket. And let's make the analogy from smoked meat goodness. It's been a popular theme on the radio show. So I think a lot of Nebraska fans, even if you're a vegetarian, would look at Nebraska football and still think it's a brisket, right? When we talk about choice and selection and what it is and how it makes people feel when when Nebraska's winning, when that brisket's done perfect, nothing better in the world, right? If you're a sports fan or, dare I say, a meat connoisseur. So it's going to take the right ingredients, and we're back to hot and popular names this week when it comes to the coaching carousel and some candidates. And you just wonder, think how far back it feels, let alone is, when it comes to September 11th, when Trev made the decision to move on from Scott. Yesterday afternoon, you had the official release of the contract. Brady Altman's from Hail Varsity posted that up on his Twitter of just what it said, what it was when it comes to Trev, and in writing what he had for Scott, what Scott needed to do to be made whole again and get another year on his contract and get that $1 million back that was taken away with his original deal, the restructuring. So there is that. And we fast forward to now. I'm fascinated to know just how big or how small the list is right now for Nebraska football when it comes to Trev and his list. You got a guy already on that list right now under consideration in Mickey Joseph, right? What's Mickey's fortune like here these next 5? He's been recruiting his butt off. His staff's been out recruiting on that topic. It's a big day for Malachi Coleman. Tough ball game last night for Lincoln East against Gretna. Gretna is awesome. Flores is awesome. But Malachi makes his decision known today. We all think he's probably going to pick Nebraska, but time will tell at 5 o'clock there. And on the bigger front, it's also kind of another showcase day for some of these candidates. Trev's very real when he talks about not wanting to win the press conference, right? It's not about splash. It's about fit. It's about trying to find the next really good head football coach in Nebraska, whether that's Mickey or somebody else, right? Maybe that's a national candidate that we've all spent the last 5 weeks talking about because it's been a new name or two each week that seems to emerge or will pick up steam. And meanwhile, Mickey's still in the thick of it here. But Elijah, I'm interested here when it comes to potential candidates here, what they want. Do they want a pay raise only? Do they want the opportunity to wake up a sleeping giant in Nebraska? Do they want the glory of being the guy to bring it back, or is it a place that's special to them because there's some sort of roundabout connection, or just listen, they're competitive. They want to go to a big boy league, one of the two power leagues in the Big Ten and the SEC, and they want to win some football games. They want to have a chance to go compete for a championship. And that's a fascinating question because when we talk about names and candidates in other leagues, all right, you have to assume moving forward here that your multiple bid leagues are going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. When this playoff expands, who's going to get multiple teams in? Well, the SEC's already done it, right? They have an argument right now as it sits for 3, and that's going to make everyone dry heave here in Big Ten country. You have Ohio State and Michigan. You have Clemson. Great, but as far as your multi-bid leagues, you have 2 of them. Is the Big 12 going to be a multi-bid league? Is the Pac-12 going to be a multi-bid league? Is the ACC going to be a multi-bid league, right? How many years, if you're Wake Forest or North Carolina State, 2 names, right, that you hear a lot about when it comes to Clawson and Doran, how many years are you going to be able to take down Clemson, right? If you're Narduzzi, you had a great season last year. You won the ACC as Pitt, but you still weren't a playoff team because you weren't undefeated. So that's a big consideration with some of these coaches. Yeah, it's a monster paycheck waiting for you, but there's also the uniqueness of being able to develop and recruit in the 500-mile radius and jump to a league where there is a multiple bid league. And, you know, how deep is the deep end of the pool for the Big Ten? Are we talking 2? Are we talking 3 when this playoff eventually expands for the Big Ten? So I think that's the appealing part. Not only is it Nebraska and a chance to work for Trev and compete and get paid, but it's a situation too where, all right, I have a better shot. Will I have a better shot to get into a playoff out of Nebraska versus staying in an ACC or a Big 12?
Well, simply put, whenever I agree with you, but to simplify this and put it at its heart, I think Trev should be looking for a guy that wants to prove that he is one of the elite coaches in college football. Is hungry to prove that, because if you come to a conference like the Big Ten and you resurrect a school like Nebraska and bring them back to the forefront after years of people saying, Well, it's Nebraska. It's not the 90s anymore. They're not in a recruiting hotbed. This isn't what it's used. This isn't a place that is what it used to be. If you can do all those things and resurrect this school, and as I said, in a conference like the Big Ten, which is a very difficult conference, you're proving to the college football world that you're one of the best in the game. That's what you're doing, and that's what Trev should be looking for, is a guy who is hungry to prove that, because it's going to take more than just a guy who, he's a high-level football coach and he's going to come collect his paycheck and do some coaching. It takes a different level of commitment at a place like Nebraska to get this place back. That's what the past couple of years have shown me, is that it's going to take a guy, as Trev said, that doesn't have hobbies outside of coaching football, a guy that the head coaching gig is his life. That's what it's going to take to get this place back, and that's what Trev's got to be looking for, is that guy that is just hungry to prove he is one of the best in college football. And who is that guy? I still don't know at this point. There's so many names out there, and we can play the name game until the chickens come home. It's you can do it all day long, but at the end of the day, that's just the simple criteria that Trev should be looking for in the next head football coach. Who is a guy that is hungry to prove himself, and that's what it's going to take at a place like Nebraska, at least in my opinion.
Don't agree with you. And the other part of this, too, is from a fit, and one of the names that's picked up steam this week, not only Lane Kiffin, right, with Lane kind of liking the attention and being really good on Twitter, right? Home is a feeling, it's not a place. That tweet, right? That was pretty good. Lane's picked up some attention, and by the way, they've got a big ball game here the next couple of weekends, right, to stay unbeaten. They're still in a playoff race. But, you have Coach Stoops over at Kentucky, and that name's been fascinating. We brought it up early in this process. We brought it up to Barry Switzer, who knows Stoops real well because he's Bob's brother, right? Coach Stoops at Kentucky. And there's a fascinating article. I think it was by Yahoo Sports. Maybe it was the Bleacher Report or the Athletic, and I know I'm naming every national outlet here. It wasn't an ESPN.com, but you had a little bit of a tisk that went on social media. This goes back to August 13th, and it comes down to Coach Cal in Kentucky basketball and their athletic director, and Coach Cal, stumping for more facilities, more investment. I'm Kentucky basketball. I make the money around here. That type of bravado from Calipari, that tone, right, in an interview with the Athletic. And, Stoops is like, look, bro, I've done really well here. Don't demean my football program. And it was Cal angling. And if you're Kentucky, the AD, I think, has brought the boys into the principal's office by now, and they've played nice and they'll stay nice on social media. But you wonder if Coach Stoops, will get over that, being second fiddle, even though he may not be. I mean, and I know Cal's won championships, right, and he's put guys in the NBA. But Kentucky's been a damn good football team. They misstepped 2 weeks ago at South Carolina. They just beat the Pirate. They're in the thick of it. They'll have a shot against Tennessee, right? I mean, and Georgia, I mean, they'll have a chance on the field to say something about where they are in the SEC East. But if you're Coach Cal, or I should say Coach Stoops, are you ever going to make more money than Cal? Is that important to you? Are you ever going to be appreciated for what you're doing? 8-4 at Kentucky, 10-3 at Kentucky, 9-3 at Kentucky. In that league is super impressive. And it's really impressive. And you may be worshipped there. You may be comfortable there, right? You can have a down season and not worry about losing your job. But when push comes to shove, guys like Stoops are competitive, and they want to be the guy. Right? They want to be the guy. They want to be appreciated like they're the guy. And there's just a couple of places that you won't be. You'll never be bigger than UCLA basketball at UCLA if you're the UCLA football coach. You'll never be bigger than Kansas basketball as the KU football coach. And you're never going to be bigger than Kentucky basketball as the Kentucky football coach. Those are 3 stops where it just depends on the personality.
Well,
and Stoops, and I'll shut up. Stoops is a guy that I think would kick just really do well in Lincoln. He gets the Big Ten. He's an Iowa guy. And that's the latest thing. I know we've been through 100 of them. Between him and O'Brien, they've been very, very proven.
And this, I think, gets back to my point about, is Mark Stoops a guy that wants to prove that he is one of the best in college football? That's what it comes down to me, because job security is not an issue at Kentucky. They pay you well. Maybe not as well as Calipari, but you get paid well at Kentucky. I think his contract right now is for just under $6 million a year, Schmidt, and you can
I will look at it, but he's making great money to go 8-4.
Making great money, and a stat that I brought up.
He's making like Braum money to go 8-4.
I mean, a stat I brought up with you yesterday on the golf course, and I'll bring it up here because I don't think I brought it up in the show before, is this season, Mark Stoops became the winningest football coach in Kentucky history when he got his, I believe it was 61st or 62nd win over Florida. So in his 10 years, 61 wins. That's, just over 6 wins this season. And he became the winningest coach in Kentucky history, overtaking Bear Bryant, who is a lot of people don't even know that Bear Bryant was ever at Kentucky because he was there for a cup of coffee, but he went and got 61 wins and then moved on with his career. And that's where Kentucky football has been at for so long, is that it's okay. Like, you know what? A coach that was barely there was their winningest coach because Kentucky was always a stop for other people. Mark Stoops has made it a place that you can stick and stay. He's been there for 10 seasons now, and you got good job security because you are the winningest coach in Kentucky history, and they know, you know what? We're lucky to have a guy like you. So if you go 6-6, it's all right, and the fans think the same way. So the job security is not an issue. They pay you fine. The question is, do you want to prove yourself as one of the top in college football? If you want to do that, you're not ever going to do it at a place like Kentucky. You can't do it at a place like Kentucky because the expectations are so low, and because, as you said, you're never going to be bigger than Kentucky basketball. So if you want to prove yourself as one of those people, you got to make a jump to a place. I'm not saying it has to be Nebraska, but a place like Nebraska. And that's what the question is with Mark Stoops is, does he want to prove himself in that way? If he does, then, Nebraska becomes a very realistic opportunity, because if you can go resurrect Nebraska, as I said before, in a conference like the Big Ten, you are proving yourself as one of the best in college football. If he wants to do that, he has to make a move.
Does the job you have represent how good you are? And he's good enough to be at a blue blood. Mm-hmm. He's just at the wrong blue blood sport, right? He's good enough to be at a Nebraska. He's good enough to be at a Florida State and at Oklahoma. Hell, if I'm Oklahoma, I call him, honestly. And his name was mentioned before Venables got the job. So, no, Stoops will have options, and he's been really good. Our rewind coming up is with Matt Schick of ESPN and Sirius XM, and Schick and Nick. He had a great sit-down with Mickey Joseph. A few tweets coming in this morning. Steven asks about Pete Thamel, reporting that Saban told his players he's done at the end of the season. Our old buddy Sharpie that we'll talk to here in an hour. I retweeted that briefly last night, and then I went, oops, it was a fake Pete Thamel account. Mm-hmm. So that was a hand grenade last night on a Friday. There's been no report of Saban stepping down. At least that was a fake tweet last night. Husker Brent, thanks for listening, says Kiffin's a good coach, but he'd spend more time on O Street. I doubt Trev's looking for a 2.0 version of somebody he may have just had. Fair point, Brent.
I think that's the point I brought up on the show. That's his reputation down at Ole Miss. He wins football games, but he also likes to have a good time, especially outside football season. So something you have to take to consider there with Kiffin.
Well, and listen, personality is important. You don't have to be best friends if you're Trev Alberts and the football coach, but there's got to be a mutual respect. Mm-hmm. And you got to have an understanding that Trev is boss and be good with that. And is, Trev's going to have a vision, and that vision's got to match with what this coach's vision is eventually. We'll step away. Great to be with you this morning on Hail Varsity Weekend Edition. I'll rewind with Matt Schick on the way. Brandon Vogel next hour.
back with Hail Varsity Radio with Chris Schmidt and Mark Cranick.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. And, well, it's a bye week, so we're going to enjoy that bye again with Matt Schick of ESPN, ESPN Radio, and Sirius XM. Of course, you catch him with Schick and Nick, the podcast with Hurrdat Media. Schick, what's good? How's the week been? Thanks for the time.
Yeah, week's been good. It was a good weekend of college football. We're in Charlotte. We got temperatures in the 50s today, which is unheard of. I don't know how you guys deal with it. Frankly, Schmidt, I don't know how I ever dealt with it. In Omaha, become very, very soft. It dips below 50. I don't really leave the house, which is a great excuse for someone who likes to eat like myself. But, yeah, we're doing okay. Doing all right.
Well, we're dealing with a little bit of 40s-ish. The order was given to shut the sprinklers down, so that happened yesterday. And we'll be back in the mid to upper 70s for the weekend, so gonna swing the clubs or lose a few golf balls. But want to start off, great sit down with Mickey Joseph, first and foremost. If you haven't heard it, please catch it on the Schick and Nick Show, the podcast on Hurrdat. But you've done a ton of interviews, and you had a chance to sit down with Mickey Joseph, local interest ahead of the Purdue game. And Matt, want to just ask you your impression of Mickey. We'll get to on field in a moment, but just what did you take away with spending a few minutes with him?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was a good 20 minutes, and when I did the interview, I did not know I was going to be on Zoom. I didn't know I'd see him. I didn't know he'd see me. And when he flashed up there, I mean, it was all right. It's go time, and it was good. I like those types of interviews where you can make eye contact, you can establish some trust a little bit, and it was an interesting interview in that you start off by just asking him a little bit more about his background. I want to know more about his coaching inspirations, and then we started to get into more about his current situation, and I think. I'll let you ask some follow-ups if you want, but I think just the more overarching feel I got from him was that he wants the job, he's ready for the job, he's not getting his hopes up that he will get the job, and I think in the back of his mind he probably understands he's going to have a decision to make at the end of this season. I think he even said, "I'm a realist." When I asked him about his candidacy, and that can be taken one of many ways. One is it's out of his control. The other is he understands they're probably not going to win out to make it a very easy decision, and there might be a lot of gray there. There's a lot of ways to read into that, but, man, is he an impressive guy, level-headed, not afraid to speak his mind, not afraid of not getting the job. Like he's kind of been there, done that. He'll cross any bridge when he comes to it, but certainly not before. And it was an interesting dialogue.
You said it, and he is a realist. He's been a guy that's worked his way up and then got the gig at LSU after some lower level stops. And Schick, he's taken notes, mental notes, all along the way. I mean, he's at 54, 55 years of age. You'd hope there's a mature guy, but he really, really is. And the thing that shows up on Saturdays, win or lose, is the leadership aspect. And I think that's been our biggest takeaway locally here covering the team, where the guys are coached up, they're ready, and he's really no nonsense. He cares about the kids, but it's I'm your parent, not your friend. That's kind of the vibe I get from him.
Yeah, and you have to have a pulse as a leader, especially as a leader of young men. You can't just give them marching orders and then watch from afar and feel distant. You really got to be engaging. I mean, people loved that about Bo Pelini when he started out, was just the fire that he coached with, for better or worse, and it certainly got him in trouble many times, both on and off the field. But coming off of Scott Frost, I mean, Mickey Joseph looks like the most energetic guy that's ever walked the face of the earth. And, it's not to disrespect and talk bad about a coach now that he's out the door, but I always felt Frost was just kind of this walking zombie who players were kind of on their own emotionally. And whether it was different, between the lines during practice, we will never know. But, man, during a game, you got to be up in guys. You got to be, and I mean up in their face. They got to see you. There's a reason the head coach doesn't coach from the box. The coach is on the sideline. He needs to be there to be face-to-face with his men, his young men, his guys. And I feel like Mickey gets that. And, I asked him, why has this team responded to you in your coaching style? And he just said, look, we hold them accountable. Whether it's, he mentioned a few players, whether it's this guy who plays a lot or this guy who doesn't, this guy who's a star, this guy who's not, you need to hold them accountable, and you need to hold our coaches accountable. And people see that, people notice that. And so, yeah, he's had a lot of different coaching influences. He mentioned a handful of names. He mentioned Tom Osborne. He mentioned Ed Ogeron. Could you find two different head coaches than that? So he's kind of filled in the space between those two guys and become his own man. It's pretty cool.
Do you get the feel that he enjoys being a head coach? I mean, it's not a guarantee that a guy, just because he's been a great positional coach, a great coordinator, is going to make that jump to being a head coach and enjoy it. Some people are cut out for different things, but from what I've seen on the sideline, it looks like he's having a good time, what I've heard in the press conferences as well. Do you get that feel that he's been enjoying what he's had to do, stepping up and filling this interim head coaching role?
Well, it seems that way. I also think it's an interesting spot where he's got nothing to lose here. Mm-hmm. Like, he doesn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders of, you've got to turn this program around. I don't want to say he's a short-timer, but when you know that, you're kind of put in a tough spot here where the expectation is you are not going to be the head coach. Whether he knows that or not, that just feels like the outside expectation. Now, he might feel differently. He might feel like he's got a great shot at this, but he doesn't show his cards. So I don't know how he would do as a head coach. I don't know. You never really know how someone would do when all eyes are on you and you've got to answer for the next 5 years, not just for the next 5 minutes. But it seems like he does. It seems like he wants it, he likes it, he enjoys it, and a guy that will be given every opportunity to prove himself down the stretch.
Matt Schick with us from ESPN, also the Schick and Nick Show, Hail Varsity Radio. Find Matt on Twitter at ESPN_Schick. And with Mickey, to the question mark out there about, does he want the gig? Yeah, he'd like the gig, but what's he best suited for? And I think that energy you talked about really makes him a high-level candidate from a motivational standpoint. But the background in Nebraska, Matt, I think he knows how to fix Nebraska. Do you agree with that?
I think he knows. There's a couple of different ways to answer that. I think he knows what it takes to fix Nebraska. I think he knows what a good Nebraska looks like, and a lot like Scott Frost does. He's also been around, recent championship caliber and national title programs in this culture of athlete that I think he can relate to really well. I mean, he talked about the fact that, when he came to Nebraska, he didn't want to be there. Like, when he first showed up in our conversation with him, I said, what was the toughest decision you ever had to make? And he said, well, probably forgiving my mom for making me go to Nebraska. He wanted to go to Oklahoma and play for Barry Switzer. But he understood that Barry Switzer was going to be his friend. And his mom didn't want a friend as a coach. His mom wanted a coach and a leader and a father figure, and that's what Tom Osborne became. And so I think he understands what a good coach is. What better influence is there than Tom Osborne? I mean, he told me he's meeting with Osborne every week. Every week he's meeting with him. He's got a standing up and he talks to him. That's a guy who's always willing to learn, a guy who's to listen to one of the greatest head coaches of all time, and, maybe model his coaching style or at least part of it after him. And he's a guy that, you're going to recruit guys who might, when they get to Lincoln, have a little culture shock for many different reasons. And, maybe Frost didn't understand that you have to re-recruit your roster every year. I mean, there was an exodus of guys from Florida that decided to leave. Would that have happened under Mickey Joseph? I don't know. I find it hard to believe that Mickey couldn't convince a few of these high-caliber guys to stay. He certainly convinced Trey Palmer and Dakotas Crawford to come with him. So, to me, I think there's a lot going into Mickey that, whether he's the head coach or not, man, you got to move heaven and earth to make sure he stays, because he's impressive as they come, and whether he's the head coach or not, can help you fix this program and can help fulfill its potential, whatever that is, in 2022.
Matt, let's look at Nebraska and the task at hand, the drive for 6. Getting to a bowl game after this season start would be impressive. You have some teams on the docket that are going to grind you up and spit you out because of their lines of scrimmage. That said, they're not overwhelming. When you look at some of the offenses and injuries that are present with Minnesota and Iowa, a couple of teams. Bielema comes in a week. And then there's Wisconsin that's trying to find themselves. Michigan we won't get into because, well, that isn't going to be a nice afternoon.
Cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, it's not going to be a good thing. But, you know, what's your outlook for Nebraska? Can they get to 6? Can they find 3 more wins? Or, man, are you thinking maybe 1 or 2 more? We had this conversation, I don't know, a month and a half ago or so, and it really hasn't changed because, you know, Nebraska still has that opportunity in front of them and some playmakers to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talked, we set the over-under Vegas-wise, FPI-wise for ESPN at about 1.5, and I said probably take the under. And then they beat Indiana, and then they go beat Rutgers. So who am I to say exactly what they can or can't do? But I'll say this. I think they will go on the field against some of these teams with comparable talent, if not a better situation in terms of health, in terms of cohesion. I mean, Iowa can't score. Iowa's a 29-point underdog against Michigan. My guess would be if Nebraska played Michigan tomorrow, it'd probably be around 25. So that might kind of gives you an indication of maybe what Vegas might think about Nebraska versus Iowa. You know, Iowa didn't. They're still trying to figure out their quarterback position and everything in between. I know they didn't make a quarterback available to the media today for the first time this year, whatever that means going forward. Tanner Morgan's status, who the heck knows? And Wisconsin with their own interim head coach, and Graham Mertz isn't the greatest of all time. So I think those are the 3 that you look at. I think Illinois, you know, if you're coming off the bye, there's an opportunity there. They just have one of the better defenses in the country, frankly, statistically, and one of the top 10 head coaches in the country, in my judgment. So I think there's an opportunity there when you get to Black Friday. Maybe you're sitting at 5 wins. You know, I wouldn't rule that out. And then who the heck knows when you get there? I would love for them to do it just so that the decision becomes a little more challenging to make. I love to watch other people have to make tough decisions who get paid a lot of money, and I love Trev. I'm glad I'm not in his shoes. Maybe in the back of his mind he's kind of hoping it's obvious, but he's also said he's not going to do anything that he's not going to do anything to win a press conference. He doesn't want to win the wedding. He wants to win the marriage. And so I don't know that the outcome of the rest of this season has any impact on that, but it sure would be fun to see them make a bowl game, to have this team something to celebrate, and frankly, whether Mickey gets the job or not, to have him be rewarded for his efforts.
In your mind, is Nebraska's issue on the lines of scrimmage misevaluation or just underdevelopment X number of years?
Well, if you look at the recruiting rankings, it doesn't seem to be. It can't be both, in my estimation. I mean, they've been on par with Wisconsin. They've been on par, if not better, than Iowa, and yet the line of scrimmage has just not been there. To me, you know, you would have to be so wrong in evaluation, you know, 8 times out of 10 to be as bad as they are in the lines of scrimmage. To me, this is all about coaching. And to me, that's why there's got to be some sort of encouragement there that they can fix this. You can't be one of the worst teams in the Power 5 at Nebraska on the lines of scrimmage simply because you missed on guys. That's just not possible. You're just bad at coaching. And to me, that's where this is. And frankly, all the line of scrimmage has to do is be average. Just be something better than deplorable, and you'll have an opportunity to win some of these football games. I don't think they're that far off from winning 8 or 9 games. But man, if you can't win up front, you got no shot. And the fact is that Trev knows whoever he brings in, there's going to have to be an expert on the line of scrimmage and a guy who has a track record of having done that in the past, because that's the only chance they have of getting this thing off the ground again.
Matt Schick with us from ESPN, also the Schick and Nick Show, Hail Varsity Radio. Find Matt on Twitter at ESPN_Schick. And Matt, were you wise enough to buy stock in Swisher Sweets ahead of Tennessee and Bama?
Yeah, that would have been very smart. It would have been very smart indeed. I just love the reaction to it. Like, if that were a Big 12 game, people would have said, "Does anyone play defense anymore?" But it's the SEC, and my God, was that the best game you've ever seen in the history of Western civilization. And not only that, Tennessee should be number 1, even if they couldn't stop Alabama. Who cares, man? Like, that was awesome, right? So it happens all the time.
If Nebraska were to take down a number 1 team here in the next couple of years, do you think the goalposts are going into Salt Creek?
Yeah, I don't know. Take them up by some sort of creek, and they just lay there in the sludge. I was watching the game with my wife, and then afterwards, she heard about it. The next day, she's like, "I heard they dumped those goalposts in the river. Like, if you're going to take the goalposts, do something smart with it." I'm like, you know what? You're right. Why are we dumping them into a river like lemmings? Where are the environmentalists shaking their fists at the cloud? The fact that we're dumping this stuff in there. And also, don't you want to keep a keepsake? Yes. Like, are you that confident that you're going to be doing this again? That you're like, hey, we're all right. This might be the best it ever gets. Who the heck knows? But yeah, that was a lot of fun, and it kind of gives you an indication. I said after the game and tweeted it out that the atmospheres that we saw on Saturday were just so good, whether it was Rice-Eccles Stadium or Neyland Stadium or even Ann Arbor. It's like, the next time a college administrator tells you we need more of these college football playoff games on neutral sites and bowl games, you have my permission to just go verbally smack them in the face, because the college football, what makes it so great is what we saw on Saturday, and that's not in sterile environments in the corporate world. It's right on campus where all these games should be.
What you do is you get a hacksaw or a chainsaw, you start chopping it up, and you go door to door and sell parts of a goalpost on O Street. I mean, you just make a little coin. And if there's a moment in time where the goalposts are threatened, Trev will put his helmet on, because those things are expensive. He will fight every single one to make sure that there's no fine. So fair to say, let's just give 3 spots in the playoff to the SEC, Matt?
Yeah, well, I would say 4. I'd say, yeah. I think it's Alabama. I think it's Georgia. I think it's Tennessee. And frankly, Ole Miss. Ole Miss becomes a 1-loss SEC team after they lose to Alabama. They win out. You got 4 1-loss teams. Have Georgia beat Tennessee, and then Georgia beat Bama, or Bama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. You got the 4 best teams in the country right there in the SEC. I don't know why you'd go elsewhere. Apologies to an undefeated Ohio State and an undefeated TCU. Frankly, an undefeated Clemson. Sorry. So bad, too bad, so sad. It's all SEC, baby.
We will expedite the expansion now, right? To the Big 12, though. I know they're beating up on one another, but man, it's better than it's been in a long time. I know Baylor's at 3-3, and Iowa State's lost 4 in a row. Texas is off the mat. KU's been a good story. TCU and K-State are going to hook up this weekend. And, the Big 12, I don't know that they'll get much consideration unless TCU stays undefeated. But it's been way better than it has in a long time, and they're pretty strong. I mean, with exceptions to West Virginia. And they just pulled off a big win.
Yeah, I think if there's anything you take from this season, it's that, the future is good for the Big 12, even without your tent poles of Texas and Oklahoma. Now you'd love to keep them, but frankly, the sooner they leave, the better, probably for everybody. Oklahoma is dreadful. and they're going to walk into the SEC, and they're going to have a grand old time in that league when they can't stop anybody. And so, when the Big 12 adds Houston and Cincinnati and BYU, I mean, it's going to be a fun league, and it is a fun league. And hopefully when they have high-scoring games, they're not knocked for no defense. But I think a great story would be TCU. They were left out of that first college football playoff despite having an electric season and that one loss that they had on the road to Baylor. Imagine if they win out. Imagine if they make the playoff with Max Duggan from Council Bluffs, Iowa at quarterback. Like, there's your Midwest connection. Let's make it happen. I'd love to see it.
Last thought, Matt Schick with us with ESPN, Schick and Nick Show with Hurrdat. Great interview with Mickey Joseph. Catch their podcast and that interview. Give me a grade on Nebraska here, midterm report card.
Oh, I'd love to cop out and say incomplete. But I think anytime you fire your coach, it's hard to be better than D. So I'll say D plus, maybe C minus if we're generous, and it's on a Friday and you're catching the teacher on a good day. But I would say D plus. I mean, the lines of scrimmage are a train wreck. They can't stop anybody, and I think the plus comes with Trey Palmer and Mickey Joseph, and the hope that you have that things are going to get better if you have the right person in there. But I'd probably say a D plus here in the midterm. Now, frankly, we're grading on a curve here, and I would say they were probably a D minus 2 or 3 weeks ago. We do our power rankings on Sirius XM, and Nebraska was like 14th in our Big Ten power rankings about 4 weeks ago. They're moving all the way up to like number 10 right now. So I think people are seeing signs of life. That D plus, if that's in pencil or you get the right penmanship, you can easily turn that D into a C pretty quickly here with maybe one more win. I mean, it'll go up in the bye as other people lose as well.
Yes, you gotta do a little manicuring of the letters when you put it on the fridge. Matt, best to you, and thanks for a few minutes today as always, man.
Always good. Anytime, guys. Thank you.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. It's hour 2. It's the weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Brandon Vogel in with us to kick off hour 2. Mark Cranack on assignment this morning. And it's a bye-week Saturday. Plenty of juicy college football games. More names in the coaching carousel. The German Shepherd is fed, thankfully. I don't know that she'll be making an appearance. But we'll dive into it here to get hour 2 kicked off. Brandon Vogel with us. Vogues, how's the weekend, and what's the excitement meter for you today? With there's no Nebraska football, but man, there's some intriguing matchups in the Big 12. It might be a Survivor Island for this. I don't know if it's a long list for Santa with Nebraska coaching search names, or if that list is shortened, or if it gets shorter by the weekend.
Yeah, Big 12 kind of leads the way again. And I think that's just by nature of there's a handful of good teams there. There may not be the kind of clear leader, although I think we might go a way to figuring that out. Well, that depends on how you feel about TCU, I suppose. But for me, I think the two best teams might be playing today in Oklahoma State and Texas. So looking forward to that one. I think that's the afternoon slot for that game. K-State TCU is a night game. That one will be interesting, though maybe too much purple for my personal taste, but I'll make do.
Vogue, what's your take on Kansas? We're a couple weeks removed from Kansas mania. They're down a quarterback. I mean, just what's the status? I know Leipold's still a hot name around Nebraska, but what's your take on what this Kansas football team is now that we're a little bit removed from the mania?
Yeah, they're really, really good on offense. Even with, the backup QB, they've been able to move the ball and score some points. Defensively, they were always, they had that strange game against Iowa State, which was a defensive slugfest. But other than that, this is a team that probably wants to be in the 40s scoring-wise and has to win that way. I looked at it Monday column focused on the coaching carousel, like, KU, I think, models to maybe one more win over its remaining, I don't know if it has 6 games left or 5 games left. So racing out to 5-0, so they have 5 games left, they're 5-2. Racing out to 5-0 was great and fun and everything, but reality might be hitting a little bit later as we get deeper into the season for the Jayhawks. And that's fine if you're somebody who's interested in Leipold as a potential coaching candidate, and I see a lot to like with him. I think it helps Nebraska's chances if Kansas, basically goes 500-ish the rest of the way.
Brandon Vogel with us. Vogues, Trev has said he doesn't want to win the press conference, which totally get. Fit is fit. That said, can you go hire a guy that maybe has a down season? It might be more gettable. Let's just play the game here for Leipold, like you just touched on. Say you jump out 5-0 and maybe you finish 7-5. Maybe you finish 6-6. It's still incredible considering where Kansas has been, right? And it's not like you haven't had some big wins or impressive wins. You just had too much of, the schedule is, well, it's Big Ten-esque, right? It's SEC-esque right now because everyone's been really pretty good and they've had their moment in the sun. In the Big 12, they've just beat up on one another. The Big Ten gets credit for that, doing that to its own. So does the SEC. I think this year, let's start a movement for an exception year for the Big 12 because there are a lot of really good teams. Okie State shouldn't be penalized for last weekend. They had that thing, and then they couldn't hold it, and it went to overtime. TCU, they're set up to fail. Bless their heart, because it doesn't get any easy after today. K-State started this whole thing with dismantling Oklahoma. So back to the original thought. Okay, you're not going to win the press conference, but can you go hire a guy that went 5-7, 6-6, or 4-8 at Iowa State, Kansas? It seems like folks have jumped off the Aranda train because Baylor's 3-3.
Yeah, which I really don't think that's going to be a hindrance if that's the direction that Alberts wants to go. I think he knows this is about a body of work to this point, and waiting whatever happens over these next 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks of college football probably isn't the smartest way to go about it. And, Matt Campbell at Iowa State is sort of the inverse of Kansas, got maybe the league's best defense, really struggling to score. And I think the Cyclones per FPI have the exact same win total as projected as Kansas at the end of the year, which is basically 6-6, 5-7. Somewhere in that range. Is that still a sellable hire? And I don't think, Trev said it from day one about not winning the press conference. I'm not sure he's all that worried about what can you sell. And I don't think, by the time we get to the end of the year, whenever Nebraska makes its decision and announces that, I don't think you'll get a ton of resistance from the fan base, because there's a little bit of recency bias here. Like, if you did that post Riley, if you hired a coach coming in on a 6-6 season, it's a problem. But because the last example was, well, you hired the undefeated coach, the one who had everything going for you, and that didn't work out, it kind of hammers home that there are no certainties, no sure things when it comes to making a coaching hire.
Brandon Vogel with us here on a weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, while we're talking about it, you mentioned it, Schmidt mentioned it. Trev says he doesn't care about winning the press conference. What's a name in your mind that's out there right now that, at least in your opinion, would be losing the press conference if they were to be hired?
Good question. I don't know if there is one that I can think of off the top of my head because, I think some of that's due to the length of the search, like when Nebraska made the change that it did. It would have to be somebody that we're not even really thinking or talking about for this job. Like if it just came out of left field, sort of like the Mike Riley hire did, though that one, once you got over the initial surprise of really, like you could see kind of the thought process, the theory behind it, and it didn't end up working out. But so yeah, it would have to be somebody like that I think just is totally off the radar at this point, and off the radar in a way where you're like, well, this search committee / Trev Alberts are maybe the only ones who see something the rest of us aren't seeing. I think that's kind of the only path. And I have a hard time coming up with a name off the top of my head. I apologize.
Vogues, who's the most off the radar for you? Like who's a guy that you love and you think you've let it play out in your mind, right? Vogues has his list in his top drawer, right? Your desk, I assume, is either in front of us. We can't see it on screen right now as we're streaming on Varsity Radio and ESPN Lincoln's Twitter feeds. I'm sure you've got your list in your drawer, right? But who's like just the most off the wall or anonymous name out there that you think, man, I've watched this team for a long time and I could see it fit? Because I'm sure Trev will call you about 9:15 this morning and get your take.
I actually did last November type up a document and titled it Top Drawer List because I was like, well, if we're gonna have to consider coaching changes from here till like we know that we don't anymore, and we didn't end up at that spot. We know that we did on September 11th officially. At the top, and so this was before any of this 2022 season, and at the top of that list for me was Kalen DeBoer, and he would still be there. I don't know if he's definitely not anonymous, and Washington, has faded a little bit from its blistering start, but he's somebody I've liked for a long time. I really liked what he did at Fresno State, and knowing Nebraska could possibly be in the coaching market sooner rather than later, it was a little bit of a blow to see him take that Washington job, which I think is the major reason, it's year one for him at a Power 5 program. Like, are you going to jump? Are you going to pull a Willie Taggart, Oregon to Florida State deal? And it seems pretty unlikely. The other one, and, this is just purely like hypothetical, but off the wall, one that is like played out in my head a little bit is, what if Pat Fitzgerald, which might seem crazy, but, Northwestern's had a little bit of it hasn't had the classic bounce that it's had in the past where, one bad year, one great year. And it lost a long-time defensive coordinator 2 seasons ago. I don't think Northwestern and schools like it, Vanderbilt, Stanford. I don't know what impact the transfer portal has on those. I don't think it makes things easier for them. And I know Alberts has a ton of respect for Fitzgerald, just listening to him talk ahead of the 2 Northwestern Nebraska games he's been part of. So that's one where I'm definitely not reporting that Nebraska has interest in Pat Fitzgerald. I'm just saying it's one that's kind of unspooled in my head in a what if fashion.
Brandon, do you subscribe to the conspiracy theory that's out there that Trev Alberts has had a master plan all along, and that master plan, at least in his mind, was to reunite Dave Aranda with Mickey Joseph and Bill Bush? Do you subscribe to that conspiracy theory could be a possibility?
I would be surprised if that were the case. So no, I do not subscribe. It's interesting. Like, you can make the connections there and, basically reunite some of the LSU brain trust in Lincoln, I guess. But seems like a very complicated plan to execute. Now, if that was the plan, it seems to be working to this point. I mean, they have Bill Bush and Mickey Joseph. You just got to go land Aranda now, I guess. So maybe if that happens, then no. Even then, I won't believe it. I'll need Trev to tell me. He's like, yeah, this was a 2-year covert operation that we undertook, and here we are, Dave Aranda.
I swear, with this coaching search, sometimes it feels like we need to like get the bulletin board out and get the red string and try to connect the dots. That's the point in this coaching search we're at right now.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I mean, credit to Nebraska. This is why you use the search firm. This is why you keep the circle pretty small. Like, there hasn't been a ton leaking out about potential candidates, and I'm not surprised by that. But for guys like us just sitting around, you're like, what do you think of this guy? Or what do you think of this team? It makes for a pretty fun conversation. I do enjoy coaching search season.
Brandon Vogel with us, managing editor at Varsity.com and magazine, and at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Now, it is fascinating, and there's an element of the fan base that's exhausted by it. There's an element that's energized by it, and I'm fascinated as well. And yeah, it's straight up the old Rico case that's being built. Elijah, way to paint that picture on the bulletin board where you've got a list, right, of the families, right, and who are you targeting? And if you're going to get the LSU folks all back together, we got to get the Cookie Monster. I mean, someone's got to find a spot for Easy Ed down in the rail yard. Coach O, just give him a megaphone.
Yeah,
go Tigers.
Yeah, since we're taking a mafia approach here, instead of 5 families, what are the 5 coaching trees you'd like to pick from? Obviously, Saban. Dabo doesn't have much of a coaching tree. Otherwise, he'd obviously be in there. I think the Urban Meyer coaching tree is pretty much needs to be removed. So. Yeah,
I think it's the Bill Snyder, right? It's got to be the Bill Snyder coaching. That's it. I mean, that is it, which leads us to the dreaded Stoops discussion point from Kentucky, because we traded Lane for Stoopsy here towards the end of the week, and I'm fascinated by it. And I went to, while we were listening back to Schick on our rewind earlier, went through and did some research, and he started 2-10. At Kentucky. He inherited 2-10 and then went 5-7 twice and then built up to 7-5 and then had his breakthrough, I think year 4, he went 9-3. Okay. He went 9-3 in year 4, won the SEC 2018 Coach of the Year, followed up with maybe a 7-5, then COVID hit and they were 4-5, and then another 9-3. So he's either 9-3 or 7-5. And I'm fascinated to see how Stoops finishes this year, because the SEC East is better than it's been in a long, long time. Georgia's been great for 5 years, but now you have Tennessee, right? And then there's Kentucky. Where do they finish in that triumvirate on top of the West being the West? So Stoops, I think he could do it. I think it's very real that there's some annoyance with, well, you're at a basketball school. I think it's very real that Coach Cal's probably kind of a punk to work with at Kentucky. And I think there's probably some frayed feelings with who the AD is gonna hug first, right? Who you picking, me or him? Yeah. Well, you'll never make more than Cal. Now's the time to jump. That is if Oklahoma ain't on the line.
Well, yeah. I mean, Kentucky's a really interesting team. I think they play Tennessee next week.
Yes,
which will be interesting. Tennessee plays UT Martin, so that's basically just a foregone conclusion. They'll get Hendon Hooker out of there for the second half, presumably, and then you got a game against Kentucky. And I think the thing that's interesting to me about Stoops is not just that he's doing this at Kentucky, but how. And you talk about 9 wins when playing in the SEC at Kentucky, like. Kentucky's not favored in 9 games a year. Like you're overachieving there, and it's how they play. It's physical. This year's team is an interesting one. Like they lost to Wan'Dale Robinson and some other offensive playmakers. Will Levis at quarterback's been really, really good for them, but they're a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, flawed this year, and they're still hanging around and they're in games, and should have one more win than they did. Really outplayed Ole Miss and would have knocked the Rebels from the ranks of the unbeaten if not for a pair of fumbles. So it's just a team that they kind of play a Big Ten style in the SEC, and that's pretty impressive. Is it portable? I think so. Kentucky's done really well in Ohio as an SEC team, given its proximity and given some of its connections with a guy like Vince Morrow. And those things, you look at it at a place like Nebraska, probably could come with. Like you could use those connections and the history you've built up there. And the one thing that gives me pause is, because it's the SEC, Stoops already makes $6.3 million, and that he's scheduled to make over $7 million, I think, by 2027. So it's going up. Like, we know Nebraska could handle it. It would just be, are they ready to come in and be like, here's our new coach, Mark Stoops, and he's getting $7 million a year.
You're going to have to pay. I mean, the Mel Tucker number, right? You're paying $9.5 million to get a guy that's going to win you 7 games. That's the rate, and that's the return. That's what it's turned into. And here's the other question, folks. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, the Mel Tucker one might be a little bit the high end of it. Like, basically LSU came in and tried to grab Tucker, and Michigan State did what it needed to do to ward that off. And I was always looking at Michigan State's season last year, not to take anything away from it. It's just like, this is 11-2, but it doesn't look like 11-2. And I kind of expected Michigan State to take a step back this year. They have. I've been a little bit surprised at how big it is, but it's the way college football goes. And because the money is so crazy, like, if you happen to be in the middle of a kind of once in a cycle season and your star is rising, well, you stand to make a lot of money, whether or not it's merited or not.
Bogues, Elijah and I were talking about this. Yeah, the Big Ten and the SEC, those are your 2 leagues that are going to have multiple playoff teams when this thing expands. We are fearing a 3-team SEC CFP this year, all right? The doomsday scenario of Tennessee, Georgia, Bama, that triangle. What do you believe? Is it easier, or is it more likely for a Stoops, a Kiffin, those 2 names to make a playoff at their current school, get into the playoff where they're at versus coming to Nebraska? And then flip it around if you're in the Pac-12, if you're in the Big 12, or even if you're Fitz at Northwestern. Where do you have the best chance to get to a playoff? Is it Nebraska or where you're currently at?
Yeah, good question. I've thought about it from kind of the outside power to compared to, so someone like DeBoer, theoretically coming from a Washington, potentially to a Nebraska, where in a 12-team setup, I'm going to assume that the Big Ten probably, you fast forward this thing 10 years into the 12-team playoff era. I'm going to guess the Big Ten averages like 2.3 teams a year in, and I'm guessing the SEC might be 2.5. So it might be a little bit easier path if you think, without USC, UCLA, you can just run the Pac-12, for example. But you've got to win that last game. You got to win that conference championship game, because it's probably going to be close to 1 spot on average, based on what we think now. Do you want to play for 2.3 spots available in the Big Ten? And I guess, come the other way, and, these are just numbers off the top of my head, but can Kentucky be that 0.5 team more often than it can be in the 2.3 in Nebraska? Sorry, I don't know why I made this so numbers heavy. That was a bad idea on my part.
You're good. You're good.
But I mean, that's really how I think of it. So, I don't think there's a big enough difference between going from the SEC to the Big Ten. I do think the difference is big enough going the other way, though. So looking at a team coming from the Big 12, Pac-12, maybe the ACC.
Brandon, before we get you out of here, I want to get your take on my $1 million business idea, and I think you'll know where I'm going with this. It's a computer AI that tracks when college football coaches gets fired, and it puts down that city's airport into the system, and it tracks all flights coming in and out that are headed to other college hubs, such as, say, Oxford, Mississippi, or College Station, Texas, or our name is city. It tracks those and it releases that on social media and lets everybody know, hey, there's a flight from this coaching hub into Lincoln because they fired the coach. What do you think of my $1 million business idea?
I like it. I like the convenience of it. It's an app. So you're like, okay, I'm a Nebraska fan. My team is in the market. You download the app and you just get push notifications of like, hey, there's an outbound flight to Oxford, Mississippi. Like, that's interesting. The problem is like, so I think the idea is strong. You got to build this thing, Elijah. You got to get it up. You got to get a ton of users right away. And then you got to sell it, because the strength of your product is going to make Trev Alberts like drive places instead of fly. So you got to get in and then get out.
Trev likes to drive. He likes to drive, man. Get in that SUV, get in that SUV and listen to a little Hail Varsity or I-80 preview.
Well, then,
the old Pod Center.
We offer a paid subscription on the app then that tracks Ubers.
There we go.
Wow. There we go. This is all sorts of creepy. Thank you, Elijah, for the invasion of privacy.
Hey, invasion of privacy is how big tech gets money nowadays. So.
No, I get it. Jonathan chimes in here. I always think about how many times Bush and Aranda have worked together. Utah State, Wisconsin, LSU. But I just don't see Dave coming here. So,
oh God, we're pulling out the red string of the bulletin board already. Oh no,
that's very true with the crossover. Vogues volleyball, Nebraska. Real quick, they are just incredible. We talked with Jacob yesterday a little bit about it, and I know there's a strong finish looming, but man, Cook has this team locked in.
Yeah, kind of just cruising in the Big Ten so far, which doesn't happen all that often. It's not an easy conference to cruise in. They got an interesting road trip this weekend at Illinois. I do expect Nebraska to kind of handle its business there, but then you got the big one next Wednesday against Wisconsin, and you're going to finish out with two matches against Wisconsin here before they're done. You'll have Minnesota, so it'll get interesting here. But so far, Nebraska's kind of minus. You had that one Stanford match where it didn't play all that well at home, which was surprising. But since then, you went on the road, you beat Kentucky, you beat a good Creighton team, despite faltering a little bit mid-match. So they've kind of won with a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but they've been tested in all the ways you expect a team to be tested at least once, I think. And then, they kind of roll over the teams that they're supposed to roll over. So in a football context, it's a little bit Georgia-like, it's the excellence you expect to see from a program like Nebraska volleyball.
Folks, enjoy your weekend. Give Junior a fist pound and throw something on the grill, all right?
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
There he is. Appreciate him. Brandon Vogel, author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion, and managing editor, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Get the newest issue of Hail Varsity magazine, the What If edition, the second edition of the What If. When it comes to Nebraska football, moments in Nebraska athletics history. What if the old butterfly effect, right, with 82 Penn State as an example and many other moments. A quick time out. We will spend time with the Iron horse. It's Gary Sharp on the way. It's Hail Varsity Weekend, and we're presented by Currency.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Thanks for spending time. Weekend edition, Hail Varsity, as we're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. We're getting to him a little bit later, but we appreciate his time. The Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, with us. Sharpie, how's the week been, bud? A couple of dynamite high school football games for you this week, and playoff season's just around the corner. How you doing?
Yeah, you know what? As we're speaking, they're unveiling the brackets. But, it was a good bye week. I think it was one of those bye weeks that all of us that are in what the 3 of us do are like, gosh, I'd rather talk about games than all this coaching speculation. But you know what? I'm happy. First of all, congratulations to everybody in the Hail Varsity Nation listening audience that is getting married today, or will be one of the thousands of people that will be at the pumpkin patches. Good luck to all of you, because earlier this week I woke up and it was like 16 degrees. It's going to be like mid-80s for the next 2 days. What is going on?
It's awesome. Elijah and I made the executive decision yesterday to do a half day, the alleged best of Hail Varsity Radio. So we were on the golf course, and we should have been doing a show. That's how golf went. But it was perfect and beautiful. But to the coaching carousel, just fascinated by the momentum some names can pick up, and doesn't matter where they're generated from, maybe Flight Tracker or whoever. But a couple of names I want your take on, Sharpie, because they're not necessarily new names, but maybe they have moved up the coaching big board. And one, Stoops, Kentucky, and then also Doran at NC State. And it's fascinating. I did a little research on Doran. He's a Kansas City guy, so there is that Midwest tie. Both guys that have done a great job, both guys that you wonder is there any way they can do more because of where they're at?
Well, and they both have Midwest connections, not only at Doran, but, of course, Mark Stoops in his time at Iowa. They're 2 names. I've heard more Mark Stoops than Dave Doran. I think Mark Stoops is a viable candidate, and I think his candidacy is absolutely real for this job. It's kind of, this is the thing I appreciate about Trev, and I'm not surprised, is that this is super tight-lipped. Now, that's ticking off some people because they want information. They want something to happen. It's still early. You don't have to hire a coach tomorrow, but there's no leakage. And there's really, in a tight circle, I don't expect it to happen. I expect when a coach is going to be named, whether it be internally or externally, that there won't be a lot of lead time where, oh my gosh, it's breaking news, and 3 days later it becomes official. But there's, it does run the cycle of who is the hot name. Everybody kind of jumps on the Lane train because that's a sexy, wow, star-studded hire. But I think when you go inside and you listen closely to the little nuggets that Trev has dropped along the way, then you can start to connect the dots on the kind of coaches that he is looking for. And the 2 that you mentioned, Stoops and Doran, along with a couple of others, like an Aranda and a Leipold, are guys that fit that bill. Isn't it interesting how we've had such a long time in this coaching search, about 6 weeks now, is how guys fall in and out of favor. KU and Baylor are playing today. Remember, that was going to be the game of the next head coach. It's just, we've all ridden this wave, but I think we're getting closer to, all right, you may see some contract extensions that happen for coaches, and then you can go, oh, that might have been somebody Nebraska was courting. But what I know, the process is going exactly like Nebraska wanted it to go.
Gary Sharp is with us here on the weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Gary, let's go a little bit conspiracy theory here. I asked Brandon to get his take on a conspiracy theory, and I'm going to go another conspiracy theory that the Twitter quote-unquote Nebraska insiders this week, what would lead you to believe that Trev already has a guy? It's not in print just yet. The contracts haven't been signed, but they lead you to believe that Trev already has a guy lined up and it's just set to be announced after the season ends. Do you subscribe to that conspiracy theory?
I do not. I would hope in his role he has in his mind, because every athletic director does, they have that sheet of paper in their desk drawer of the top 3 names, because what if their coach gets hit by a bus coming to work that day? They got to go hire a football coach. So I think he has somebody in mind. Here's what I advise people to do. Anybody that's doing that, they want a little bit of attention. They are very, very vague. If they want to come through with some legit information, that's great. But right now, there's no legit information out there. Everybody's just throwing out names, and some names have more run than others. So, again, be very, very cautious on things that are put out there. But Trev, when this process started, guys, when Trev took this job and he got into Nebraska football thinking, okay, someday I might have to replace my football coach, I think he's already in his mind had a couple of candidates that fit who he wants, and he's probably vetted them and probably vetted them a little bit more. But in terms of discussions, all of that stuff is agent-wise right now. Lane Kiffin doesn't fly in the middle of the week for when he's getting ready for Ole Miss LSU to come to Nebraska to interview. People don't fly to Lincoln to interview for this job. They meet in Atlanta. They meet in Chicago. They meet in remote places like in Denver. They meet in San Francisco. So you'll follow a couple of things. There's nuggets that are being dropped along the way. Just follow those. But right now, you could say a name and somebody would go, yeah, that sounds like a good person.
Sharpie, what was your take on Metrics Mania this week?
It's one of those things that I think Trev, and remember, Scott wanted this stuff in writing. Trev was like, hey, let's just agree to it. I'm good with you. I think at the end of the day, Trev wanted this to work. Did he think this was going to work? Not really. But for the sake of Nebraska football and where they're at right now, he wanted this to work. And he wanted to give Scott every chance to make this work. Now, the metrics that were released had nothing to do with his employment status. It just had to do with adding the extra year. But I do know Trev wanted Scott to work. He wanted this to finally start to pop or at least get its feet on the ground. And he clearly knew Georgia Southern and leading up to Georgia Southern that this wasn't going to happen. So, they're out there. I wasn't, nothing caught me and went, oh, my. It is important, though, to remember, because a lot of people said, okay, why would USA Today be interested? Why didn't the Lincoln Journal-Star and the World Herald sue? Well, they did, but their cases were a little bit more vague. What happened was important for the public records request. Did it matter around the country about a Nebraska football coach? Probably not. But remember, the USA Todays of the world are the same ones that went through with a Freedom of Information Act at places like Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, when we're dealing with sexual assault. So that's how it's supposed to work. It worked. We all looked at it and we went, okay, we're waiting for the next head coach. Not a big deal. That guy's no longer here.
Gary Sharp with us here on a weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Gary, if you don't mind, we got about 6 minutes left here before we got to get you out. Can we go to some prep action? And Schmidt, if you got more on the coaching search, feel free to jump in here. But
the playoff action is where I was going next.
Well, I want to start off here though with a big decision upcoming tonight for Lincoln East Malachi Coleman. East fell last night to Gretna, but still a big decision looms nonetheless for Malachi Coleman. And Gary, I want to get your read on that. Is Nebraska the betting favorite for you tonight?
Yeah, he's coming to Nebraska, and he's been pretty much committed to Nebraska for a while, and he's going to be one of those rare in-state guys that commits to a coach maybe slightly ahead of a program, because he's committing to Mickey Joseph. Mickey Joseph is the guy that has said, okay, all of the stuff we got to deal with Malachi, I'm the guy that can get him there. So he's going to commit to Nebraska tonight, and it's it's been a good year for Lincoln Athletics, and I hope he enjoys it. And I know it's going to be, an event. But here's the thing with Malachi, and this is what Nebraska coaches Mickey and whoever else is here next year. Malachi could be one of those guys that Monday through Friday is going to drive the Nebraska coaching staff nuts. because there's going to be antics. There's maybe not going to be going 100% every day. But he'll get to Saturday, and he'll make plays on Saturday, and you go, that's the guy we were recruiting. But can he do enough Monday through Friday to make sure that he plays on Saturday? I think Mickey, this is his project. And I think Mickey is pretty confident that he can take Malachi, who, he's had ridden the ups and downs of this season, that Mickey can take Malachi and get him to be really good on Saturday. But wherever the challenge will be, and this will be on Malachi to take that next step in his football career, what's he like in a college football program Monday through Friday, so that he can ensure that he's going to be on the field on Saturday. But, it's been a great year for in-state products, and this is a good pickup for Nebraska. He's one that's also, when he gets on campus, they've got to get something out of him, because that wide receiver room is going to look a lot different next year without Trey Palmer and some young guys who are probably going to lead the program.
Sharpie, Gretna, impressive win last night over East. Flores was dynamite. Saw different footage of Zane on the move, making some great throws. Excited locally here for Southwest. It's juniors school, and just what a Millard North's really, really fun, man. They're a really awesome program. They had a tough one last night, but man, they're just tough to defend, tough to stop. A lot of points. I've seen them twice, and Southwest and Millard West get to rematch after just 2 weeks ago that great comeback by Millard West. What's your take on Millard West and just some of the other Metro teams that aren't Bell West or West Side or Gretna? I mean, those are your three big dogs. Who else is, I don't want to say dark horse, but going to be really entertaining this postseason?
Well, Millard West quietly has won 4 in a row, and they have a young quarterback that has started to spin it a little bit better. There's going to be some matchups like Millard South. I don't want to play Millard South. I don't want to play Creighton Prep when they're a double-figure seed and they're coming on the road. West Side and Gretna and Elkhorn South are the 3 best teams. And West Side has a really favorable draw. Gretna and Elkhorn South could play in the semifinals. Schmidt and Elijah, you've seen Zane Flores in that group. They're really, really good. And it's not just Zane Flores. They're well-coached. They've got a lot of depth. But I had Elkhorn South last night. People kind of slept on Elkhorn South, and they just finished the year unbeaten because they didn't play a really, really difficult schedule. The closest game they played all year, they beat Millard South by 3. But they have Cole Ballard, who is a touchdown machine. They have Carson Ronner, who is a junior quarterback that is going to be on the rise. You watch all the attention that he'll get next offseason. And then they have, a very, very good line. It's not just Maverick Noonan, who was fantastic last night, and he has come on. He is a wrecking ball. I can't wait to see him at Nebraska when they put some more weight on him. So watch out for Elkhorn South. But outside of that, some other teams, you always have to be leery of Grand Island, Kearney, and North Platte, and they all get to host in the first round. So you could have a surprise team that makes a run. But I do know this. Whoever makes it to Lincoln on November 21st, they will have earned it in Class A, because I think we'll see next Friday some upsets where they'll look like an upset because of a higher seed beating a lower seed, but you'll go, nope, that's not really an upset. So I think clearly West Side, Gretna, and Elkhorn South are the top 3 teams, and you could have Gretna and Elkhorn South play in the semifinals, and that would be great.
Is this as deep as it's been for you? Not only Metro, but just in A. You've got your studs, but you've also got pretty good balance. It's a really good year for ball this season.
Yeah, I would agree, and I get to see a little bit of Class B, and Class B is the same way. You can make a case that, there's Bennington, Gross, and then there's probably 3 or 4 other teams that could make a run. I just think, the high school football has been really good around the state of Nebraska this year. It's not just Lincoln and Omaha, and it's been predominantly Omaha in Class A, but I think the high school football in this state, this class, the next class, and the following class, so we're talking 23, 24, 25, and then here in Omaha, the 26th class is going to be really, really good. High school football is in a good spot, and I can't wait for the class. It's going to be a lot of fun, and there are prospects all over the place. And when you have a player from Ainsworth that all of a sudden becomes a national recruit, you know that the state of Nebraska is doing something really good with their high school football.
That is absolutely correct. Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse, with us. Sharpie will gear up and get ready for the Pig Farmer next Saturday, and enjoy your weekend. Enjoy some sunshine, and thanks for jumping on with us.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Appreciate you. There he is, Gary Sharp, with us on Hail Varsity Radio Weekend Edition. And, man, we will be back and ready to go on Monday. Matt Vogel going to be with us on Monday, get his thoughts on the O-line as Nebraska tries to gear up forward. Of course, Ver's high school coach himself up at Scott, so get his take. We've got a great playoff schedule loaded up here locally at KFOR and ESPN Lincoln for next week. And that's going to be outstanding. A lot of baseball this weekend, and enjoy your Big 12 extravaganza this weekend. Elijah, take care. Let me know how I need tweeted pictures of that brisket.
Can do.
All right. Take care. Thanks for listening to Hail Varsity. Back at you Monday.